So we want people to take action. And then if they make mistakes, that's okay. We bake that into our processes. We expect you to, if you're not failing a little bit, you're probably not trying hard enough. And by accepting that, we need to push the limits. We're going to fail some. We'd rather have you make a mistake and just try something, push the button, launch it, ship it. And if we have to, we'll retract it later. When people are hired, we're looking for that type of attitude. And then we push it in pretty much every way that we do. The other thing I would say is like very solid core values and a mission statement that reinforces those principles is important. And leadership kind of has to bang that drum over and over again. I think it can kind of become wall art and just like cool words that you throw around every now and then. But when those things connect back to having that async-first mentality, it really does like help push that forward, I think.
You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. All right, so this is episode number 3 for the week. This is our first week back to recording episodes. What is this, like the 3rd or 4th week of the month or of the year? Things are finally ramping up, and we're excited to have Chase with us. So Chase was recommended by Darren Murph. For the listeners, for anybody listening to this and that has listened to previous episodes, you know that the last question we ask is, who do we need to have onto the show next? And Darren very quickly recommended that we have Chase on. And so we're so excited to have you here, Chase. How's your week going?
It's going good, man. I'm feeling the pressure when Darren Murph recommends you. It's like, you better show up. So that's a huge honor coming from him. He's a great guy, great friend. I've learned a ton from him over the years and listened to his episode. You know, I've listened to lots of episodes where he's given lots of great wisdom. So hoping I can follow in his footsteps today. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I was going to say, we need to take this moment to give Darren some love. We talked about it before we recorded or before we hit record, but Darren is just all around good dude. He's super smart. He cares about everybody. He's very intentional with everything that he does. And so, yeah, shout out Darren. I don't know if he's going to be listening to this, but we love you, man.
Ditto.
And so we start every episode with something called Good News Stories. And this is just a fun way for us to kick off the episode. Could be something that's happening in your personal life. It could be something that's related to Doist and your work. Really, whatever's coming to mind for you. And we like for our guests to go first. So what do you got for us?
I love that. It's a great way to kick off a conversation. We had something pretty cool happen recently. Every year at the end of the previous year, we have a leadership retreat where the leadership team goes away for a week together and, has some challenging conversations and comes up with, what we're going to work on for the next year. And we realized that we had this kind of like issue with velocity, like execution velocity, like getting things moving quickly. And we have the system called the Do system that we'll probably talk about some today, which is basically like how we push projects forward. And we work in like quarterly cycles on cross-functional, what we call squads. So every quarter, there's a new set of projects that you're assigned to and you're working on. And we decided we usually give 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of every cycle, to create a spec. It's basically like you have 2 weeks as a team to start. And by the end of those 2 weeks, you should have an idea of what you're going to create for the rest of the quarter. What we decided during that meeting was we're going to squeeze that down to one day. Like day 1 of the quarter, your squad has to produce a spec. And I was super skeptical. I was like, I don't know how this is going to work. People are coming back from Christmas vacation and we're kicking off a quarter, which is kind of daunting. And instead of 2 weeks, you have one day to tell us how you're going to do this. And we called it an embarrassing V1. It doesn't have to be polished. It's not going to be polished. It's probably not even going to be correct, but it's going to push people into asking hard questions in a fragment of the amount of time that we used to provide. And to my surprise, this has worked super, super well. And across the company, we're seeing much more velocity, or we're moving a lot quicker than we ever have. And so I'm pretty excited. We just implemented that and it's already bearing fruit.
Amazing. I'll go next. This is always tough when we have multiple episodes in a short period of time, but seeing as I just got back from paternity leave, I'm getting caught up. There's a lot of news and exciting things that are happening. And my good news is we had our first stand-up check-in for MPL Live and our next location. So MPL Live is our live podcast recording Last year was the first full year we did events, and it was a huge success, events in general for us, both like in terms of like feedback and turnout for the events, but also just like revenue wise. We were pretty sure about the first part, like it would be well received with our community, but we we're like, can this really be a sustainable line of business? Well, the short answer is yes. And so we have bigger plans for this year. And our first MPL Live is going to be in Toronto. And it's our first international MPL Live. And as my daughter Astrid would say, I'm definitely nervo-sided. That's a combination of both nervous and excited. You know, trying to coordinate an event in an international location. I actually have done a personal event in Lisbon. I did this before we started doing events at MPL. So I know we'll be fine, but it's also a new location for us. And it's believe it or not, it's a top 5 listener location, Toronto, Canada. So super excited. So that's my good news for today.
I'm also going to go business. We are going on our 3rd week in the office, 3rd or 2nd. I don't know. I'm losing track at this point, but we're really early in the year and we've already signed on 2 new sponsors, which is a great start to the year. This wasn't, I don't think in any previous years we've been able to, close new sponsorships this quickly. And it feels like we have pretty good like sales flywheel. As of the last year, I think events has really helped with that. I think just like being out there on LinkedIn, having a ton of episodes at this point is definitely helping with the LLMs. And it's just nice to have like a healthy sales pipeline, because when we don't, it's stressful. We're a 2-person company, got to, eat what you kill. I'm just trying to think of another way of saying that. But yeah, so it makes me feel good going into 2026.
Especially on the back of a like record year. Like last year, we just grew so much. It was like, in the back of your head, you're like, was that a fluke? Can we replicate that? It's always hard, like building off the growth. So it's good early signals for sure.
And so Chase,
yeah, congrats guys.
Thank you. So Chase, tell us about your background. Like give us the Chase Warrington origin story. I know now you're the head of operations at Doist, but where did you start your career? And how did that lead you to Doist? We did a webinar recently on how HR teams are actually using AI. And we had people like Brandon Samut on there from Zapier. And we kept coming back to the same idea. AI only matters if it makes insights usable. And that's exactly what ChartHop has built with AskChartHop. Instead of having to dig through spreadsheets or click through a maze of filters, you can literally type a question and get the answer that you want instantly. Whether that's org charts, churn risk, hiring timelines, pay equity views, headcount plans, all of that can be generated in seconds. When Steven and I saw this live at HR Tech, we were genuinely blown away. I could totally see this being great for an HR leader who needs quick help to prepare for a board report or has to answer a question that comes up at their next C-suite meeting. Like, what better superpower could a people leader have? And so if you've been looking for something like this and you want to see what it looks like in real life, you can try AskChartHop at charthop.com/AI. That's charthop.com/AI.
Yeah, it's an interesting pathway because I kind of had 2 chapters of my career. So when I was in college, I knew that I had a passion for travel and like living in other countries and learning languages and stuff. And so I started out in the business school and then ended up focusing in on an area in finance and international business, and knew like at some point I wanted to make those things work. But like this is back in 2008 when I graduated. Remote work was really hard to find. International opportunities seemed thin. And so anyway, I kind of like went through a chapter where I worked in the insurance and like finance world. And that let me dabble in that because we worked a lot with like Lloyd's of London and some international markets and stuff. But I knew like that wasn't probably my long-term thing. So at some point, about 8 years into that, I took a year off. My wife and I traveled, dabbled in like starting e-commerce shops and just kind of like doing the digital nomad thing, spending a few months in different countries. And along that way, I realized like I was really lonely. Like I missed working in a team environment. The solopreneur thing wasn't really for me. And so I started looking for remote, like truly location independent jobs. Like I kind of made the North Star. It wasn't tech. It wasn't productivity, 2 spaces I would say I work in here at Doist. It was really, I want location independence. Where can you find that in 2015? And so my wife found this article that had like 75 companies that are hiring from anywhere in the world. And 73 of those jobs were engineering related. And I'm not an engineer. So again, 2015, totally different time. Remote work, location independent work was just not really a thing. But one of those companies that was hiring for something non-engineering was Doist. And so I applied. The background for the role kind of fit my experience, but it wasn't a perfect match. And it was a big step backwards compared to where I had been if I wanted to step forward in my previous career. Anyway, location independence, my North Star. I said, yeah, let's go for it. And I got the job. And Doist just ended up being a fantastic place to work. I would say we're really known for our product, Todoist. I mean, it's like one of the leading task managers in the world, and people know us for that product. But a lot of people know us just as the company because it's a great place to work. It's a place that adopted remote first principles 15 years ago. And I really learned that quickly. And fast forward almost 10 years, I've been there now. I've done a handful of things. I've led our business development department. I was our head of remote for a few years when we were going through the COVID transition and a lot of things were changing in terms of remote work. And then for the last few years, I've led our operations. So it's been a great journey. It's a great company to work for. It's allowed me to live all over the world and, truly enjoy that side of what I care about. And then also, try to learn new, ambitious things all the time with a pretty smart group of people.
And man, how so much has changed, but so much hasn't changed all at the same time as it relates to, this origin story. Cause I feel like today, these types of remote your North Star from 2016, it's like we're somehow ended up in that same place all over again, that it's just super hard to find remote or compete with because there's so many people who are looking for these types of jobs. So I can imagine the opportunities at Doist are in high demand. And so I want to talk, before we talk about kind of get into the nuts and bolts of how work gets done at Doist, I want to just kind of better educate our audience on what you do. Like, for example, I didn't even know that you were the company that built Todoist. So when you're talking to a stranger, how would you explain the core business, your value proposition? Share a little more on the company.
Yeah, sure. So Doist is a team of about 100 people that, as I mentioned before, we adopted remote first from day one. Our CEO's first hire was remote, and then he just never stopped hiring remote. So we've never had an office. We're in the software tech space. We focus on productivity tools, with Todoist being our number one flagship product. Started out as like a task manager on steroids for one. And then it grew to where, teams of all sizes, from 2 or 3 person teams up to enterprise organizations from, some of the bigger companies in the world are using it to manage their projects and tasks. We also have a communication tool called Twist that's sort of like a Slack alternative. We built it for ourselves with the idea that we weren't really thriving on Slack as a team that really focuses on async work. We didn't want to we felt like we were being forced into communicating synchronously when we really wanted to do async really well. So we built that tool, and it's currently going through a big refinement. But in kind of summary, I would say we are really focused on building simple yet powerful tools that enable teams of all sizes.
Love it. And I have to say, for me, I'm glad we're going to talk a lot about async communication today. For me, I joined the workplace in 2000. So I'm a generation earlier than you and Daniel. Work was very different in 2000. It was super frustrating. But back then, you kind of were bent to the will of the company. You just had to do things the way things were always done. And I worked at the type of organizations, accounting, investment banking, really strong cultures, you perform or leave. And so I adopted how those companies operated. And then fast forward to 2014, I launched a SaaS software company, an engagement survey company called Workify, and started trying to reprogram my mind to operate and build a team in a way that would just be more agile, drive better results. And I have to say that shifting to an async working model, just rewiring my mind to operate that way, it was tough. And Daniel reminds me before that shift and after that shift. So be curious to hear his thoughts. But I have to say that's probably the one change that I made to how I personally work, like openness to asynchronous, that has transformed my career and my life. Like I don't think you can succeed over the long term in startups, at least like high tech, if you don't have like an async mindset. That's just my personal point of view. And super glad we're going to talk a lot about async. We're also going to dive into what impact that can have on decision making. And you said it yourself, Doist works across multiple time zones. You have a big remit in running operations. You're working closely with finance. You're working closely with HR, waiting for sign off on things or working in kind of a linear waterfall kind of way won't tee you up to be successful when you have one day to plan or whatever it was from your good news story. And so, you've said that independent decision making is a non-negotiable at Doist. And so I just want to share something that Darren Murph shared with me. So I have my 2025, I launched my own kind of content, my own content hub called Warringtonomics, and I focus more on AI. And so in an interview, we were talking about the concept of an org brain and the importance of org brains and just, building an AI powered workplace. And one of the things that he shared is in a world where AI is woven into every workflow, an org brain isn't optional, it's survival, and it will decide the future winners and losers. The companies that will win will centralize knowledge so that decision making can be decentralized. And I just had to share that quote because I think it just like encapsulates what we're about to talk about. And so tell us a little bit about how you built the kind of trust that you need, some of the key kind of pillars of the way you do work at Doist that contribute to a successful async working environment.
Yeah, it does. It takes a lot of intentionality to create a async first. And like we talk about, a lot of people like to talk about remote and remote first because that's like, what that I think it was catchy for a long time and people think about that freedom to be where they want to be. But Stephen, you said this already, like switching to the async first mindset is it's actually like even more of the key. I'm not going to necessarily say to success. There's lots of like synchronous first companies that go meet up in an office and they're super successful. So it's not to say it's like one size fits all, but for us, what has worked really well was saying like, we want to be remote first, but even more than that, we want to be like async first. And so what does that mean? It means having that org brain that Darren talked about. We have like 1,200 page handbook that we've been building for years that's super well searchable and it's constantly cleaned up. It's one of the areas that I focus on in my role is like, we have to have a really solid knowledge base that you can go and find whatever you need. And so like there should always be, for example, like we should have a link to every question that you have, meaning if you have a question, we should be able to say, oh, there's a link to that in the handbook. Here you go. And putting that at the forefront of everything that we do is super important. We also have to have this concept of like, you can have a bias for action, like ask for forgiveness, not permission. So we want people to take action. And then if they make mistakes, like that's okay. We bake that into our processes. We expect you to, if you're not failing a little bit, like you're probably not trying hard enough. And so by accepting that, like, we need to push the limits. We're going to fail some. We'd rather have you make a mistake and just try something, push the button, launch it, ship it. And if we have to, we'll retract it later. So I think like just kind of like when people are hired, we're looking for that type of attitude. And then we push it in pretty much every way that we do. The other thing I would say is like very solid core values that reinforce those principles. And a mission statement that reinforces those principles is important. And leadership kind of has to bang that drum over and over again. I think it can kind of become wall art and just like cool words that you throw around every now and then. But when those things connect back to having that async first mentality, it really does like help push that forward, I think.
So most important thing, hire people that are just going to move fast. They're not looking for approval on every little thing they're doing. It's okay if they break things the first or second time around. When it comes to actually making decisions though in this environment, is there like a framework or a way that you talk about this with your people to where they feel empowered to make these decisions themselves? Are there certain types of decisions that shouldn't be made async? I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. Hey everyone, really quick. I can already tell that this is going to be an episode where you're going to want to take a lot of notes. And that's kind of a pain in the butt when you're casually listening. So we have made it super easy for you. And we've turned the entire episode into a downloadable PDF so that you can enjoy the conversation and grab the notes later. The link is in the description below. So go grab that before you forget. And now, back to the episode.
Yeah, it's not pure chaos as I may have made it sound in my first response. So we work through the system we call the do system. It won't be, on the surface, it's not going to be very foreign to probably a lot of people listening to this. A lot of teams have sort of their own version of this or some model that they follow. But we basically, like, everybody works on their individual teams, like the Android team or the marketing team or the finance team or whatever. But we also are simultaneously working on cross-functional squads, is what we call them, in quarterly cycles. And so those are, you might have someone from the Android team, the marketing team, the product team, and the finance team collectively working together in this squad. So there's I don't want to use the word rigid, but there is a standard set of rituals and processes that everybody's going through, and there's decision trees. And so we give these squads, these models, like they're really the ones doing the work and producing the stuff that ultimately ends up in front of our customers or builds the infrastructure that upholds the stuff that goes to our customers. And so the work is really happening there. And there's a lot of process and documentation and guidelines that get people to ultimately making those decisions. So it's very important to have that in place. And we're constantly updating it, tweaking it, especially with the emergence of like new tools that are coming out, and always like looking to learn and, tweak the system so that it gets people to those inflection points where when they do need to make the decision, if they don't have the guidance they need or the answer that they need, we empower them from that moment to just go ahead and make a decision.
What are some of those rituals and processes? And I'm honestly selfishly asking because we're a small company. It's just me and Steven that are full-time, but we have two contractors that are also full-time. Small team, lot going on. Every day there are probably like 5 or 6 decisions that need to be made between the 4 of us. And sometimes it's tough to like get us all on a call or to give everybody the context they need to make a good decision. And so I'm really curious to hear more about these rituals and processes and see if there's anything that we could steal from you.
Yeah. Could I like maybe on like a high level kind of take you through like a quarter, like just like in terms of, all right. So like basically we have, and just shut me up if it starts getting like too in the weeds, and we'll
is
what
you're here for.
Okay, so let's position ourselves in like December 1st of last year, right? And we're looking forward to this quarter, the first quarter of 2026. Around that time, we have 4 what we call stream leads. So there's 4 streams of work. Underneath those streams, like one of those streams is product. So under product, there might be 4 product squads that are going to be formed, that are going to each individually have their initiatives that they're going to work on for a whole quarter. So about a month before us, the 4 of us that are the stream leads for those. So one of them is like operations. So our finance and people and HR, like all of that stuff lives under me in that one. We start planning ahead about a month in advance, and we form all these squads. We build these cross-functional squads. We set goals for them. We collaborate with the squad leaders, the people that are going to lead those squads, to kind of come up with everything that we want to accomplish at a very, very high level. But then on January 1st, that squad meets for the first time, and they're often running for a quarter, kind of on their own. Like we set the goal in the end, and then they have to get there. During that quarter, those squad leaders and squad members are going through a whole bunch of rituals, like what we call weekly snippets, which is kind of like an async version of a stand-up. Every 2 weeks, they're doing what we call company demos, where they're doing like a recording, showing what they've been working on the last 2 weeks, kind of like a higher level, deeper dive. Every month, we're doing a retrospective on each squad. So each squad is self-reporting. Hey, here's what's going well. Here's what's not going well. Here's what we should change, things like that. And then, so basically we're going through that like every month, every couple weeks, there's some kind of ritual, and I could probably keep going, but I'll bore you with all the details. But those rituals kind of keep the squad on track. And then every month we report to the whole company. Here's a dashboard of how every squad's doing: red, yellow, green, milestones, context. There's links to everything that they're doing, so you can dive deeper if you want to, but we tried to really simplify that, because we found one of the things in an async world is like Oh, information overload is a problem. And you can really get in the weeds on information overload. So we try to really boil things down to, like, we use this phrase, simple yet powerful. Like, what is the simplest form of the information that we can get out to everyone? And so, yeah, boiling that down to like a 1 page, here's what's happening at the company. You have links if you want to dive deeper, has been super helpful.
I love that. And it's so helpful to get a peek behind the curtain in terms of like at a detail level, how companies are successfully like managing these types of rhythms and cadences. To me, a huge part of this is communication, because I'm just like trying to imagine a struggling squad. They've kicked things off. Maybe they're a couple of weeks into the quarterly epic, or whatever you call the bigger. If a sprint's two weeks, I don't know what you call the quarterly equivalent, but there are already kind of some early signals like, shoot, we're running into some problems here. You really have to have a culture effective communication, like to quickly share that, to not feel like if I share this already 2 weeks in, that's not going to be handled in a punitive type of way, or I'm not going to get yelled at by a manager for, divulging information that there's just so many things that start swirling in my head. And I know you've really helped shape the communication standards at Doist. So like, how do you manage that? What are some of the pillars you all put in place, and maybe kind of like some lessons learned? Like, tell us more about the communication side, because that's so clutch.
Yeah, you're right. Like, it's funny when you're working in a more synchronous environment, like, it doesn't feel like you really need to coach people through, like, here's how you talk to each other. Here's how we meet, but like in the async world, it definitely feels like that. Or if you don't, things can get really chaotic very quickly, or you lean really far into information overload. So we have a whole section of our handbook dedicated to communication. Off the top of my head, there's probably 10 pages of content just on like how to communicate correctly at Doist. One of those pages, the first page, is what we call like our 10 communication guidelines. And it's basically like day one, when you join Doist, like you read this document, because it just really tells you everything you need to know about how we communicate it. It pushes things like, we expect 24-hour response times. We expect everybody to be able to clear their inbox every day. So, we can't sit around waiting on you for days and days. Don't go radio silent on your team. We push people to do everything in transparent spaces, not, don't go to your DMs, put things in a public channel where people can see it, even if you think other people might not need to know that information. At the same time, be very, careful with who you're notifying. We don't need notification overload for everybody. Every notification is a potential distraction. So in Twist, the way we communicate is like, I might post something in a public channel, but I'm keeping the number of recipients that are actually going to get pinged to the absolute minimum possible. And then we have like guidelines on how to call people out. Like, it's okay to publicly call people out if they're not hitting these standards. There's actually like snippets in there you could just copy paste. So it's like, hey, I'm not really saying this. The handbook says you're not doing this correctly. Just let's get back on the same page here. And so it's super important. Like, we take this very seriously. I mean, I think things kind of fall apart when we start drifting away from this. And one aspect that kind of gets overlooked there is like, we even talk about how it's good to bake in normal human communication into your async communication. Like, async communication gets very like robotic, and like you don't feel the human connection. And that's the thing that ultimately might cause it to decline. So we push people to build human connections in there, and it's okay to have synchronous time for just like social hours or things like that. Like, we want you to have those things too, but the core of how we communicate is async, and we want to be kind of like, make sure that we're guiding people the right way to communicate collectively.
Yeah, we don't have like a formal handbook or anything at MPL, but it does feel like we have some standards around communication. And I'll just give one example. So every day we do a daily stand-up, and not only are we communicating this synchronously, but in Slack every morning we're dropping in our previous day's rocks, our rocks for the day, and any parking lots or blockers that we need to discuss. And I feel like this one single touch point, well, I guess two, both in Slack and in person, is what builds the momentum for the day. Because if there is something that needs to be decided on, we're going to make that decision in the morning. That's going to be, either a blocker or a parking lot that we're going to discuss. And the expectation for everybody is that we're going to drop in those rocks before the call. And if you're not going to be on the call, then you're still dropping in your rocks and you're tagging the person that is either blocking you or that you need to talk about something with. And so I feel like, it's important to have rituals, processes that are easy for people to understand, and all of that needs to be very clearly documented. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but that was what was going through my head as you were talking. One of my favorite webinars from 2025 was about leave. And this was like a month or two post baby being born. So it was really relevant to me at the time. And we talked about how leave is usually put into 3 buckets. Number 1, the compliance and pay side that you have to get right. Number 2, the business continuity side. So coverage, managers, the return to work plan. And 3, the very real human stuff that's happening at home that shapes how people show up. This couldn't have hit harder for me and Steven. We've both recently added little ones to the family, and it served as a reminder of how complex leave can be, even on a tiny team like ours. Most companies focus almost entirely on that first bucket, but Tilt is built for all 3. Tilt is a leave experience platform that manages all types of leave, from FMLA and PFL to everything in between, with role-based visibility for HR, managers, and employees. They create personalized leave plans so that people know what's happening, what's next, and how they're supported throughout the entire journey. Behind the scenes, Tilt's AI-powered technology automates the admin, keeping everybody aligned, ensuring accurate pay, and turning compliance into a clear, trusted process, so HR teams can focus on the human moments that actually define culture. If you want leave to feel less like spreadsheets and more like clarity and care, check out Tilt at hellotilt.com/MPL. That's hellotilt.com/MPL.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think like that daily practice of just sharing like what you're working on and what you accomplished, what you plan on accomplishing, and what's blocking you is like just such a simple thing to insert into a team's life, and it makes all the difference in the world.
And so we've talked about async work, how to communicate better, which leads to better decision making. Another benefit that we've talked about at Links on the show about is how async work is really what sets you up for good AI. And we spent probably an entire episode talking about this with Darren, how if you have an org brain and you have async workflows clearly established, that it's easier to experiment or operationalize AI. And so I'd imagine that Doist is doing some cool work on that front. Is that assumption correct? And if so, can you share a little bit more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, man, that's such an interesting question. Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with someone close to me who works in a super synchronous, like traditional walk into the office every day kind of thing. Very intelligent, forward thinking company, but their use of AI was like kind of shocking to me, like how little they've adopted it into their just day-to-day workflows. Even something as simple as like, they have like all these meetings. They're classic, like trapped in 5 hours of conference room meetings every day. And they're not using AI at all to like take notes, to recap things. And they're like, well, we do that on our Teams meetings, but like, and it's a virtual meeting, but not in person. I just thought like it hadn't crossed the mind yet to do that. And just like, all the context that's missing for people who may not be able to join, or the notes that weren't taken or whatever. So anyway, it's just like a funny example because we happen to have been talking about this. I think when you work in the tech space and when you work in an asynchronous environment, like you're so dependent on technology tools, things being written, and then again, like trying to avoid the information overload because there is so much content to absorb, that it just lends itself to leveraging these tools that are emerging in the AI space to better that work. Actually, right now, like one of the squads that I'm leading the name of the squad is AI Ops. And it's basically like revisiting everything that we do internally, like all the tools, the do system that I mentioned, the handbook, even down to like I mentioned our snippets, right? Snippets were designed, our handbook was designed before AI was really in our lives. And so we bolted it on here and there, but like now we've got a squad for 3 months that's intentionally rethinking everything and like being like, how can we leverage AI to remove manual inputs and make this whole thing even better. And so like just one example is like, because I mentioned this earlier, I said earlier, like we start about a month before a cycle begins doing the planning, right? So there's like 4 to 6 of the top people in the company spending many hours during a month focused on planning out the next cycle. And we just sat down this AI ops squad. Like we were like, how can we turn that into like 3 hours with AI? Like, how can we take 5 or 6 people and make it like 2 or 3 and do it instead of 3 or 4 weeks, 3 or 4 hours? And like, so we're in the process of doing that. Like we had our first prototype yesterday and we're like,
Damn.
man, this is working really good. We're looking at like, how can we build cross-functional search leveraging LLMs across all the places where content lives. Like we have stuff living in Google Docs, Google Sheets, in Twist, in Todoist, in GitHub, in our handbook. Like there's a ton of content out there. And sometimes you need to find something. Search works great individually in all those tools, but how can we leverage an internal bot that could search all those places and reveal all that content? So these are the kind of things that we're like looking at now, and they're incrementally saving massive amounts of time and improving efficiency. One thing that's really important to us is like a principle of building our company is we don't want to grow headcount by very much. So like we have big aspirations to scale, but not in terms, a lot of people focus on like headcount and hyper growth. We're not that company. We're like, we'd like to stay at like 100 people, but just watch all the other numbers go up. And we think leveraging AI is a great way to do that.
Oh my God, just give me like a guilty pleasure and let's like nerd out just for like a hot second. And so what sort of tech stack, like, do you look at when you're considering accelerating kind of your business planning? And you don't have to name tools. Like what could that possibly look like? I'm curious if a V1, if an MVP a prototype has already been dropped, like, can you share with us a little, like, what does that actually look like? Or is it, low tech, high tech? Like just give us a peek into that if you can.
Steven, this is the coolest thing. So when we were building out our cycle, we kind of have like a draft, like it's not really a draft, but like when we're building these squads, we're like, there's like, hey, I need Bob for this squad and I need Susan for this squad. It's like, no, I want Susan. So there's like this between the squad leaders and stuff, there's this like, give and take. Well, anyway, it ended up that with everything we had on the plate, this squad we didn't have an engineer left over to work on this squad, which seems like kind of a stupid thing. Like we don't have an engineer on the AI ops squad. Maybe we should prioritize that. Just decided, you know what? The tools are strong enough now to where we have a people person, a finance person, a CX person, customer experience, and myself, who aren't necessarily the most tech savvy in the world, leading this initiative, right? And we're able to create stuff that's pretty through vibe coding and such. Like you're able to create stuff that at least an engineer could later implement. We can develop prototypes that we could later put into play. So yeah, I'm like it's funny because I'm leading this squad and the people in my squad are like way more hyped up on it than I am. I'm like, I'll set the vision and then let's get there together. But we're using a variety of tools. Like there won't be anything, we're using Claude Code to do a lot of things right now, but like people are dabbling in other tools. And then we're pulling in our CTO to support us here and there who can go a bit deeper.
This is music to my ears. So what you don't know is that Daniel and I agreed literally right before I went on paternity leave that I would be essentially putting on a new executive hats at the company. Like if you could almost consider us like, we operate very much like, co-CEO, COOs, and depending on the initiative or project, it like, is that a fair way of describing it, Daniel? And so for this year, for Q1, at a minimum Q1, it might actually extend further, depend on what we're able to accomplish. I'm going to be focusing more as CTO, Chief Product Officer, our product being like MPL as an entity, as a company. And so I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technical person, but I've gotten like super passionate about vibe coding and I'm pretty proficient with the tool set. And so the fact that a much bigger company is doing something similar, obviously at a different scale, that brings me a lot of joy in my heart because we have some really exciting things planned. And it's just amazing how much vibe coding and the tech stack, what it's opened up with just like the Gen AI capabilities. It's wild.
Real quick, y'all. If you enjoyed our recent episode with Janie Cinguino, where she shared Viva's playbook for reaching 100% AI adoption through manager-led learning paths, then we've got something for you. Janny is hosting a private roundtable for modern people leader listeners who want to go deeper and ask all of the questions. This private roundtable will be happening on February 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And they're intentionally keeping it really small, so there are only 10 spots total. I think last I checked with them, they have a few spots left. And so if this sounds like your jam, you can find the link in the show notes to sign up. You can also go to execviva.com/MPL. That's execviva.com/MPL.
It's wild, man. I'm with you in that, like, it's just not my background. And I think, while people are throwing around like the term vibe coding and the umbrella of words and terms around that, like I think, working in the tech space, I'm surrounded by mostly engineers who speak that language very well. And like up until now, it's not been expected of me as an operations person to be able to speak that language fluently. Like maybe I can speak it at like a very basic level, but now it's like, you have the translator in your hand that you can use. And it's challenging, I think. Like, I think something that's okay to acknowledge is there's a bit of imposter syndrome for a lot of us that aren't coming from the engineering space to say like, okay, yeah, like I can produce that thing that I could never have imagined producing. But once you kind of step through the veil and give it a shot, it's very satisfying and also just like pretty amazing to think. Like, I think about how it can have an impact on us from an operational standpoint. Like, what does it mean when suddenly everybody's kind of a junior developer, and what can that do for us from an efficiency standpoint? So I guess I just mentioned that because that was a blocker there for me for a long time, where I was like, that's not my space. I haven't ever had to do that. You guys do that. And now that we're sort of like breaking that barrier down, it's pretty cool to see how it's impacting us.
Daniel called it because we use an async doc, an internal document that we use as we're going through these conversations. We're just sharing notes and comments. And at the very beginning, when we hit record just a little under an hour ago, he was like, I know this is going to be a baller episode. And in my head, I always know a good episode if I quote it a lot, and I will be quoting this one. But even more so, it's when I've been like, you know what, Daniel, I think I need to go work for HubSpot, or I think I need to go work for Rivian. Like these epic episodes we had with like Katie Burke, and I won't go through the whole list. And I'm listening to you, and I'm like, maybe I need to go work at Doist. Like, this sounds awesome. Yeah. And so kudos to what y'all have built to get us back on track, because we don't have a ton of time left. One of the main kind of reflection points for Daniel and I as we look back on 2025 is AI transformation, or the kind of work that we're talking about, async work, or just working in a more modern way is what I'll call it. It's as much a culture shift. It might even be more so a culture initiative than it is an actual tech initiative. And so I want to talk a little bit about culture, because it's huge. And I love that culture is back in these conversations, because culture was a big thing like 2015, 2016, and then it was engagement. And then we kind of got off track with COVID, and, it spiraled from there. And so I love that, more and more leaders are focusing back on cultures. Tell us a little, you've said that culture has nothing to do with the office and even less to do with like Zoom happy hours. So what is culture to Doist, and what does a culture need to look like? What are the key aspects of a culture that can support some of the things that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, we like to define our culture, which I think is a little bit counterintuitive to what a lot of people think, because I think they hear the word culture, it sounds a little bit fluffy. Like that is when people for a long time were going to the Zoom happy hours or the video games they could play together online, and like, yeah, we have good culture. Or even like, going further to something, one of the things that I oversee at Doist is our like in-person strategy. Like we bring people together 2 to 3 times per year and do these retreats in different parts of the world. And like, that is part of our culture, but that's like a side dish more so than it is the main course. We really look at culture as like, what are the unifying principles and direction that we give everyone that brings people together and gets us collectively rowing in the same direction. And so it's things like, some of the things we've thrown around. It's our core values, it's our mission statements, it's our communication principles. And then it is also like having a robust social calendar so that people can connect virtually every couple days or weeks on a more personal level. It's coming together in person and actually enjoying some time just getting to know each other, but also producing stuff together. What we found is that like our team really wants a balance of like when we come together, whether it be virtually or in person, like they want the social time and they want time to like hang out and get to know each other on that personal level. But they're also like, the work is what actually unites us. So like, let's also get into that, and finding the right balance between those two things, not going all in on just producing stuff all the time and not going all in on Zoom happy hours, is, it's somewhere in between. And so I like to spend a lot of time, like before we had the rock star head of people that we have now, this was something that I spent a lot of my time on, and now I get to partner with her on that, and it's pretty good for us.
And remind me, who's your head of people? I think I know who it is, but I want to make sure.
Her name is Nadia Vatalidis.
Former guest on the show.
Yeah,
I think.
Oh, was she a former guest on the show?
Yeah,
I didn't catch that one. Okay.
Did she work at Gorilla?
Test Gorilla?
Test Gorilla. Yeah, yes. She was at Remote. And then she was at Test Gorilla, is that right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. She is awesome. She's transformed things at Doist. And you had mentioned to me, you said like, be thinking of someone that you might want to recommend in the future. And that's who I was going to recommend because I didn't catch her name. So I'll be thinking about someone else in the meantime.
Yeah, she's great.
She is.
And it's been a while. I think it's been like 2 years. I mean, since you brought her up, what does that partnership look like? So it sounds like she joined relatively recently. Walk us through, I guess, the first few months partnering with her and what y'all are focused on.
Yes, I was lucky enough to be on the hiring committee. When we hire people, we do a hiring committee style. So we have 3 people that after the people team, interestingly, in this case, the people team, the people that were screening their future boss for the head of people, they pre-screen some people and then they boil it down to a smaller group. It was the largest pool of applications that at the time, this may have changed in the last year or so since that happened, but at the time it was the largest pool of applicants that we've ever had. Thousands and thousands of applicants for this role and incredible talent. Like never seen, like it was amazing. To get the list down to 50 was extremely hard. And we're talking about people coming from like very big name organizations that we would all know that were wanting to come work at little old Doist. And we were just like kind of blown away by this. But Nadia stood out as like the person that we were like, if we can get her. She went through all the interviews, did the test projects, all those things. And her test project was actually something that we wanted to implement like right away. And so anyway, it just worked out beautifully. So I was part of the hiring process to bring her on. And then we do a mentorship program where for the first 3 months you're at Doist, everybody gets paired up with a mentor. It's not normally your direct, like who you directly report to. It's usually a peer, could be on your team, might be on another team. In this case, I was her peer. So I got to spend 3 months, or her mentor. So I got to spend 3 months working very, very closely with her and kind of helping her learn the ropes of Doist. I also learned a ton from her because she's bringing knowledge from GitLab and remote, unicorns like remote, and having done the consulting for all these different companies. And so it was just, I mentioned all of that because, some of the things we have baked in there were like really, really set up those first few months for success. Like we had a test project for her to do and all the final list of applicants. And like we implemented that test project like pretty soon after, like she had the groundwork done when she walked in the door. The mentorship program gave us a great opportunity to get to know each other and learn our strengths and weaknesses and how we could help each other. And then I mentioned the streams of work, the different squads. So like I'm what we call a stream lead, which means I have 3 squads underneath me and she's a squad leader for one of those squads. So I'm collaborating with her on her work every day and she's supporting me in mine. So yeah, it's a really great like collaboration. She focuses really on classic like people work. Like she's focused on the people. I'm more focused on the tech, the systems, the tools, the workflows, things like that. But those two things overlap quite a bit. So fortunately, I've got a good partner in crime there.
One of the best, literally. And it's funny because the section that we're talking about is why culture doesn't require an office. And if I could hire a senior leader who on day one is ready to implement a new initiative or program that has been vetted, it has been reviewed, it is like, I think anyone would take that. Like, it's like, why are we? It continues to boggle my mind that there is this bias to synchronous work and to office-based work when you hear stories like this. And sometimes Daniel and I feel like we're in bizarro land because we're so lucky to know the Chase Warringtons of the world, the Nadias of the world. And so we know that there's a better way, but I don't know where I'm going with this either. We're also a 2-person company. And I know we've been tainted by Wade Foster, who's also been on the pod, the CEO of Zapier. And his like parting words to us were like, there will be a day when there's a single $1 billion company. And I know Daniel, that changed the way Daniel and I thought about hiring. So anyhow, all that to say, like, I think you've given a strong case and about why, you can have a strong culture. You don't need an office. But if there's like one stigma that people still get wrong about building strong cultures in distributed environments, like, what do you think that is? Like, help us demystify this, because sometimes it feels like a fight that's just becoming increasingly hard to fight for us. So what's your wisdom there?
The thing is that people focus a lot on like what something is or isn't, depending on how we want to make the argument. And when it comes to async work, people will say things like it's inhuman, we're social beings, we're supposed to be collectively in the same place, things like this. And for a lot of people, I'm sure that works great. I think, Stephen, what you were alluding to earlier about it being a big change for your life is that you actually get so much time back in your day to reinvest in the relationships that really matter. And so I'm talking about, like the way that I work compared to the way that the person that I was talking with yesterday that I referenced earlier, that's in the office 5 days a week, is very synchronous, meetings late, early, all those things. Is like, I have on average about 2 to 2.5 hours of meetings per week. That means I have a ton of time, and that's across the board at Doist. The average is about 2 hours per week. That's a ton of time back in my day for me to spend with my family, with my friends. I get to manipulate my schedule based on what works for me. I've had some family health issues that I've been able to be there for, sitting in the ICU, but also being able to get my deliverables done for the week or the month or whatever. So I think there's a lot to be said about, like, when we talk about being a social being, like, what's the social circle supposed to look like? And so that's been a big thing for me. That's why it's been so important to me, is like, I have so much control over my day that allows me to actually be more social in the way that I want to be. And then the second part to that is like, you can be async first and then also create lots of social interaction. We have a robust calendar of virtual events that people can join. We have epic retreats, and we rented a castle in France that we're going to next month. And we're bringing all 100 people together for a week in this privatized castle. Like, we do that stuff and people love it. And we say, do you want more or less of it? They say 2-3 times a year is perfect. I got everything I need with that. So I guess it's just, rethink it. Start from scratch if you want to say, is this something we want to do or not? Like, don't think about what your preconceptions of it are. Think about, like, what could it be if you could redesign it today? And that's worked well for us.
Can you hire me for the 1 week that y'all are staying in that castle?
Yes, I know. I don't want to miss the opportunity. You guys mentioned, you'd fit in awesome at Doist. So it's a great time. Like, we try to do everything. We have this kind of quote that we use internally that we want to do everything at a world-class level. And that includes these retreats that we do. Like, we try to, like, make them epic experiences for everyone. We see them as a core part of our culture, and we want people to walk away like thinking, like, I can't wait to go back to the next one. That's one of my burdens to carry, but it's a fun one.
Were you going to say something, Stephen?
No, just I would love to be at the castle also. So,
castle ticket. Everybody gets a ticket to the castle.
Well, we're 8 minutes over, and I want to be respectful of your time. And so we're going to go into rapid fire questions. So same set of questions that we ask every guest. I think we tweaked one of them since you're in operations and you're not in HR. And so question 1, what's one piece of advice that you'd give somebody starting their career today?
I think if we're specifically talking about someone, I'll just speak from the perspective that I'm coming from in operations. When you're designing workflows and picking tools and, you're trying to keep everybody kind of rowing in the same direction, it's really easy to get extra prescriptive, like to create really rigid guidelines and rituals and, expect everyone to kind of do the same thing, because that creates some form of order. It also kind of validates you as you're doing your work. Like, I got everybody doing this one thing. But I think there's a fine line between being like overly prescriptive and allowing the right amount of flexibility for people to choose within the workflows and within the tools, like how they want to use them to the best of to the way that works well with how they work. So I'm constantly kind of like trying to find that balance. But when I first started in operations, I was very focused. I got too overly prescriptive, and there was a negative effect to that. So I wish someone would have given me that advice.
Great advice. Next question. If your team gave you a superpowered nickname, what would it be?
Oh man, I have a reputation as maybe the diplomat. So people can.
That's a Netflix show.
Yeah. Is it really? Well, then it's a lame nickname. It's already taken.
I think it's a good one.
But yeah, I think there's some, people bring, I think people in people roles, and I'm somewhat in a people role in operations. Like, people bring you their perspectives, and we should be doing it this way. This person should be doing things better or worse or differently, and finding a middle ground and, getting people to the table and is, I think, a strength that I have, and something that, people lean on me for. So I guess I'll go that route.
Picture
the Netflix route.
Yeah. Great show, by the way.
Gotta check it out.
Yeah, great nickname. Okay. If you could steal one strategy from another company, what would it be?
Whew, I steal so many already. This is tough.
Real talk.
When my role as head of remote was created and I moved into that, like, that was literally part of the job description, was like, things are changing so fast in the space. Like, we had lived for so long as a remote first company and kind of being like a pioneer of that space. And then all of a sudden there were like, everybody was remote and everybody had all these principles to share and tools they were using. And we were like drinking from a fire hose. Like, we want to keep up with this. This has been a competitive advantage, but we're sort of a commodity now. So I just went out and it's actually how I met Darren, funny enough, was just stealing strategies. And Nadia, who came to work for us, who's our head of people now, I was stealing stuff from her about how they did documentation at GitLab and at remote. So anyway, I don't know that I can say, this is all to say, I can't choose one, because I'm like a chronic thief of information from the leaders out there.
I think that's a fair point. Like, it's like asking you what your favorite band is or what your favorite movie is. Like, there's just so many that factor in. So we'll take that. We'll take that one for today.
It's a weak answer, but thank you for giving me the grace.
Who do we need to have on the show next? If there's someone, and we will take Nadia because it has been a minute since we've had her on. But if you can think of someone else that deserves a spotlight platform, does anyone come to mind in the people or ops?
I gave this a little think, since I mentioned Nadia before and I found out she'd already been on the show, she would be a fantastic guest again. But have you ever spoken with Chris Hurd by any chance?
No.
Chris Hurd he's from Scotland, I think he's based in New York now, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, he founded a company called First Base. I know him through the remote first kind of world, but very successful, has built some incredible companies. He's big on people and, leadership and the startup space and everything. So I think he'd be a fantastic guest on the show. I've seen him speak at a few events, heard him on a lot of podcasts, and I think he'd really enjoy being on the show with you guys.
Well, I've added him to the list, and I'm going to go connect with him on LinkedIn right after this. Great suggestion.
Excellent.
All right. Final tradition of the show is something that we call one word or phrase close. Anything that's coming to your brain as we wrap up this conversation. Could be one word or it could be a few.
Our motto internally is simple yet powerful. And I think there's so much power in that simple mantra that it just guides so much of what we do. It's very easy to get caught up these days in all the tools that are emerging and building all these complex workflows and, using every little tool that's out there. But sometimes leaning back to like, what's the most simple way to get this done the quickest is really what guides me when I'm trying to decide which way to go sometimes. So simple yet powerful.
All right. Mine's kind of dumb, and I'm sure like the marketing team has used this at some point. Just Doist. I don't know.
If it hasn't been used yet, it will be now. Well done.
I'm going to go with asynchronous. I'm like back to where I started. It's like was so impactful, and is a huge part for kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it was just so much fun going deep with you on the power of asynchronous work, how you have accomplished all the great things y'all have accomplished at Doist, how, you're baking that into an AI powered workplace. It's just been a lot of fun. But I think, the central pillar around that supports all of it is asynchronous. So that's my one word. And so Chase, thank you so much for being flexible. This should have been recorded a few days ago, but I had an old man tech issues and I couldn't get in to Riverside. So thank you for being flexible. This was so much fun, well worth the wait. So appreciate you joining us today.
Likewise. Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. A lot of fun, some great questions, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. So I appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye, y'all.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.